The Michigan Department of Corrections confirms Jarvis Butt was found dead inside of a prison intake center in Jackson. A spokesperson says that staff members tried to revive him, but he died shortly after 6:45 this morning. His death is being investigated as a suicide.
She was 13 years old. She walked out of school on a Tuesday afternoon in January, turned a corner in Detroit, and then she was gone. No fight, no scene, no witnesses who saw what happened next, just a girl who disappeared between one moment and the next, and a secret she was carrying that almost nobody knew about yet. And here's the thing that's going to sit with you for the rest of this video. The man who took her from that street, who admitted to it in open court, who got sentenced and was supposed to spend the next 35 years behind bars, he's dead. Less than 2 weeks after sentencing. Gone, but Ziyah Harris still hasn't been found. There's a detail at the center of this case, something investigators found early on that won't make complete sense until we get toward the end of this story. Keep it in the back of your mind, because when it finally clicks, it changes everything about how you see what happened to her. Ziyah Harris was 13 years old. She lived in Detroit, Michigan, the east side of the city, and by every account, she was just a regular kid doing what regular kids do. Going to school, talking to friends, figuring out who she was. She had a family that loved her. A mother who would spend the next 2 years pushing for answers through every court date, every press conference, every moment when it would have been easier to collapse inward. Ziyah had people who needed her home. That matters. That's not just background, that's who she was. January 9, 2024 was a Tuesday. It was cold. Detroit in January is always cold. Ziyah left school like she'd done hundreds of times before. The route home, the familiar streets, the kind of walk where your mind drifts and you're not really watching your surroundings, because why would you? She was last seen near the corner of Cornwall and 3 Mile Drive. That's it. That's the last moment anyone on record saw her alive. Within hours, she was reported missing. And what followed was the kind of search that starts out desperate and hopeful and slowly, painfully hardens into something else. Detroit police launched a missing persons investigation immediately. At first, it looked like what it looked like, a teenage girl gone, no obvious reason. But investigators don't just wait. They start pulling threads, phone records, digital footprints. Who was she talking to? And that's where things start to get dark. Investigators discovered that Ziyah had been in contact with a 43-year-old man named Jarvis Butt. 43 years old, she was 13. Let that math sit for a second. The messages between them were not innocent. Prosecutors would later describe conversations that no child should have been drawn into, communications that were clearly grooming, clearly predatory, and clearly aimed at getting Ziyah to trust someone she never should have been near. And on the day she vanished, January 9th, those messages led her directly to him. Now here's where I need you to hold on to something. Because what investigators found next is the detail I mentioned at the beginning, the thing that reframes this entire case. They found it early, they understood what it meant, but the full picture of why it mattered wouldn't come together until much later. We'll get there. Stay with me. The day after Ziyah disappeared, Jarvis Butt was spotted in the area of the Rouge River. That alone might mean nothing. People go to the Rouge River. Detroit is full of waterways, but investigators noted what he was wearing, or more specifically, what he was carrying: clothing. Clothing that matched the description of what Ziyah had been wearing on the day she went missing. That detail shifted everything. In an instant, this was no longer just a missing persons case. Detectives began building towards something much heavier. Weeks passed. No sign of Ziyah, no body, no location, just absence and an investigation quietly gaining momentum. And then this is the part that genuinely floored me when I read it. Investigators confirmed that Ziyah had been pregnant at the time of her disappearance. She was 13 years old. And according to prosecutors, that pregnancy and the threat it represented to Jarvis Butt was the reason she was killed. Let that sink in. A child who was already a victim, already being exploited, was silenced because the person exploiting her didn't want to face consequences. That's what we're dealing with. Here's something that took me a second to fully absorb when I went through the case files. Ziyah was not the only victim. As investigators dug deeper into Jarvis Butt, his phone, his history, his patterns, more victims started coming forward. Multiple cases of criminal sexual conduct. Multiple minors. 6 separate cases in total would eventually be filed against him. Each testimony painted a clearer picture of who this man was. Not someone who made one catastrophic mistake. A predator who had been operating, targeting children for longer than anyone had known. And the system hadn't caught it. Think about that for a second. While Ziyah was missing, while her family was waiting, while investigators were piecing this together, there were other families out there who didn't even know yet that their child's name was part of this same story. 3 weeks into the investigation, detectives had enough to arrest Butt. He was taken into custody. And for a moment, just a moment, it felt like the case was moving toward resolution. It wasn't. Because even with Butt behind bars, even with charges filed, even with a case building, Ziyah still wasn't found. Investigators searched areas near the Rouge River. They followed leads. They worked the case like they were supposed to, but there was no recovery, no remains, no location that gave her family anything concrete to hold on to. And here's where this case starts to feel different from most. Usually in true crime, in the structure of how these stories unfold, the arrest is the pivot point. The case cracks, the suspect is caught, and everything else follows. The trial, the conviction, the closure. This case refused to follow that script. Months passed. Ziyah's mother continued speaking publicly, continued showing up, continued demanding that the world not forget her daughter's name. And the legal process ground forward the way it always does, slowly, deliberately, without any regard for the grief waiting on the other side of it. This is one of those cases where I genuinely don't know what justice looks like. The man is arrested, charged, evidence is stacking up, but the family still doesn't know where their daughter is. What would you do if you were in their position? How do you keep going? February 12, 2026. 2 years, 1 month, and 3 days after Ziyah disappeared, Jarvis Butt walked into Wayne County Circuit Court and entered a guilty plea: second-degree murder, multiple counts of criminal sexual conduct, 6 separate cases. He admitted to it. All of it for the family, for investigators, for everyone who had spent 2 years on this case. That moment in court should have been some version of relief, an acknowledgement, a confirmation that they had been right all along, that the evidence was real, that Ziyah's story was being heard. But he still didn't tell them where she was. No location, no remains, no final answer. He pleaded guilty to killing a 13-year-old girl and sat there in that courtroom and still kept that one thing from her family. March 12, 2026. Sentencing day: 35 to 60 years for second-degree murder. Additional concurrent sentences for the sexual conduct charges. The judge made clear what kind of person Jarvis Butt was and what he had done. He was sent to the Charles Edgeler Reception and Guidance Center in Jackson, Michigan. Standard intake for Michigan doc. The beginning of a very long sentence. And here's where I have to pay off that detail I've been holding back from the beginning of this video. March 26, 2026. 14 days after sentencing, staff at Charles Edgeler were contacted about an unresponsive man inside the facility. They attempted life-saving measures, performed CPR, did what they're trained to do when someone is dying in front of them. It wasn't enough. Jarvis Butt was pronounced dead at the facility. Officials reported his death as a suicide. The investigation is ongoing, but that is the working conclusion as of right now. The man who confessed to killing Ziyah Harris was dead less than 2 weeks into his sentence. And with him, at least for now, any chance of finding out where she is. That's the detail. That's what I needed you to hold on to from the beginning. Because the question this entire case now sits on isn't about guilt. That's been established. It's not about justice in the legal sense. That sentence was handed down. The question is, where is Ziyah? And right now nobody can answer it. Here's where this case stands today. Jarvis Butt is dead. The perpetrator is gone. There will be no appeals that drag this out for decades. There will be no parole hearings, no decades of court appearances. In one sense, the criminal legal case is closed, but Ziyah Harris's body has never been recovered. Her family does not know where she is. There is no grave to visit, no place to go, no physical marker of the life that was taken. Just a corner in Detroit where she was last seen, and a family that has been living in that absence for more than 2 years. Investigators have not publicly closed the search for her remains. Detroit police and Wayne County prosecutors built this case meticulously, and those same people are presumably still working whatever threads remain. There are 6 families tied to this case through the other counts. 6 separate cases of criminal sexual conduct. Those victims now live in a world where the man who harmed them pleaded guilty and was sentenced, but also died before he could be fully accountable in the way the justice system is supposed to enforce. Is that justice? I don't know, and I think that's an honest answer. I want to hear your honest take. Does what happened to Butt feel like justice to you? Or does it feel like he took the easy way out while Ziyah's family is still left with nothing? No wrong answers, drop it below. This story had you locked in from the beginning. You already know what to do. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share this one. Seriously, the more people know Ziyah's name, the better. And trust me, the next story on this channel hits just as hard.